Hey YouTube, how you doing? It's Max. Today, do another update video for the game. Uh, as you can see, I haven't really made any progress in the actual game, but what I have been doing is sort of, as you can see, yesterday I was doing a lot of brainstorming. So, pretty much what I was doing was trying to plan ahead all the different classes, parameters, types, weapons, armor items, skills, status conditions, etc. If you go into where is it? You know, the the game engine. Sorry. Yeah, you have all these spots for items, right? But you don't have any like subfolders. So what I'm eventually gonna have to do is if I go into items and if I want to do HP recovery potions, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to go like HP recovery and kind of create this little, I guess, header. And then I can start going like HP potion 1 and then record the information. And then HP potion 2, record the information, and so on. And then, if I go into this thing again, you can see that I've allocated about 10 spots for HP recovery. So then if I change the maximum, when I get to, 31, like 1, 2, 3, so yeah, I'll pretty much, create another one, MP recovery, which is like mana points. So, this is going to be the allocation. Eventually, I'll fill all this in, but before I guess this is kind of minimum viable product, but not really minimum viable product. It's more just planning ahead. So like I'm sort of just kind of forecasting. Sorry, my throat has been kind of bleh, but I'm just kind of forecasting what I'm gonna need. So just writing down all these sorts of things. If you're creating a game, this is something that I recommend doing, especially in a program. Like, if you're doing something like this, where, if you create HP Potion 2 and you can't just insert, because this is already going to be defined as the 23rd item. So if you go back into your programming and you like, say like item 23, then I don't know if any of this is going to make sense, but if you're doing coding and you define something as item 23, you can't just then move it to item 24 because it's going to break all the code that references item 23. And if you wanted to say instead call it by its name, HP Potion 2, if you decide to change the name of the potion later, then all the code that's tied to HP Potion 2 breaks. So this is, when you start talking about, if you've ever heard terms like spaghetti code, where you just input a couple potions and then some mana potions, then some other items like escape items, and then you're like, oh, I kind of want to add another like mana potion, another HP potion, and then you put it way down here, it's gonna be kind of really out of line. And if you do that with a lot of different asset items, it's gonna get real confusing real quick. So that's why I'm pretty much just kind of planning ahead. These are not really like final names. This is just kind of like placeholder names. So I might like I don't even know if I'm going to use half this stuff, but at least I have the placeholders there in case I do want to use it, if that makes sense. So I can kind of project that I'll need about 400 item slots. That's pretty like I'm not going to actually probably use 400 item slots, but just to give myself an idea of how many I'm going to use. So I did this with items. Sorry, did this with classes, items. You can see the weapons right here, and I might be further doing like melee weapons versus magic weapons. I don't know if I'm going to do any more, but I know that I have attack damage as a parameter, and then I have magic attack as a parameter. So I'm really going to try and play with those two. I don't think there's going to be a third parameter. If there is, then I only have about 90 weapon slots, so I can continue on. But I think for these categories, it's a good start. And also, when you're kind of doing this, you kind of want to think about the players' inauguration to the game. So, are they going to be able to follow along? So, it's this balance of trying not to incorporate too many items to the point where it's just going to overwhelm the player, but you want to have enough items or plan for enough items to where you can still make the game have a lot of depth if it comes down to that, if that makes sense. So especially for like an RPG, um, people kind of expect there to be some sort of depth, not just like a couple items. I mean, you could get away with it, but I don't know. I guess I'm a bit ambitious when it comes to this. I don't know if 90 weapons is a lot. I think it's a pretty decent amount for like a game that's, like a solo developer kind of thing. But this is just kind of the what I've been doing this past I guess day since I've recorded the last update. But you can see this is the armor, and then you've got the skills. So with skills, what I was kind of doing, these are like your abilities, and so you've got your basic attacks for physical damage, your basic attacks for magic damage, and that's pretty much what I'm going to assign to the you don't it doesn't cost any mana. So if you know like struggle in Pokemon, or if you play a game where you just do like an auto attack, because I'm going to incorporate a lot of auto attacks um, as like a viable strategy where you can give yourself extra auto attacks, and especially for more physical fighters like martial fighters, there might be like a TP system, which is pretty much your uh, the more you attack, you have a bar that charges up, and then once the bar gets to a certain point, it unlocks like an ultimate ability, and so that might be more like the physical fighting play style versus the magic. I think instead of magic being like charged for an ultimate, I think the benefit of magic is just you can use the ultimate whenever you want, so long as you have the mana to cast it. So I think magic might be overpowered to a certain degree if you can continuously supply your damage dealer with mana, and I think that's what I want the payoff to be with magic, where if you can harness enough of that energy, and that's going to be like the challenge of continuously harnessing energy if you want different players in your party that can continuously feed your damage dealer mana, because it might be hard to for the single, like if you have like a magic sweeper, I guess you could call it, or a magical carry. um, they're going to be focusing on attacking. So if they have to waste actions to revive their mana pool, then that lowers the amount of damage you're dishing. But if you have like a support class that's constantly feeding the mana, that's kind of where I like that chemistry. Where I want supports in the game to feel valuable, and so you're not just going into the game with a bunch of DPS units. You got like your tank that can absorb hits, and I kind of want to try to customize the AI long term to target your, probably gonna target your DPS units first, or your healers first instead of your tanks. The tanks they're not even gonna touch, but the tanks are gonna probably get these abilities that are taunts that would draw attention to them. So these are just some long term ideas, but that I'm going to be sharing. But this is kind of the me going through a bunch of skills, skill categories, and just kind of like trying to plan out. So, total of 450 skills. This is going to be a long project. Again, just like the items, don't know if I'm going to fill up them all, but at least I have like an idea of how many I'll need for each of these categories. So, you got your buff, debuff skills. These are just straight buffs. These are buffs plus a status condition, so maybe a long term buff that lasts a couple turns. That isn't just a straight up buff. Maybe there's some other details in there as well, or multi buffs, more customizable buffs. Um, so, yeah, this is pretty much just all the planning, the healing and restoration. So, some mana restoration spells. So, like I was saying, if you have that wizard or that magic person who's going to be dishing a lot of damage, your supports may want to take up some of these skills and add them to their move pool. And I haven't really decided how I want to do skills. It might be one of those things where it can be as complicated as you want it to be, or as customizable as you want it to be. Um, I think in general, I see classes as more of like training wheels. So like if you don't really understand the game, the classes sort of help you understand the game a bit. But I think once you get to late game, or if there's like an advanced player who just wants to experiment, I like the idea of like letting the player kind of experiment and kind of customize the characters to their liking. So I kind of want to do something along those lines where you can really just customize any of the playable characters that I throw into the game. But that's a long time from now. But maybe it will be something I'm tackling next week. Who knows? But I'll show you in a bit the notifications I've kind of lined up, because I have been creating a lot of those as well. But pretty much these are some skills. These are the status conditions. So again, 140 status conditions is unheard of in a game, I think. But that's just especially like this. But it's just planning ahead in case I want all this stuff. So you've got your buffs. I don't know if I want the buffs to be like their own thing and not status condition. Um, and buffs and debuffs, like just change the parameters for whatever. But I kind of like the idea of labeling everything as status conditions. And as you kind of get down here, you'll see that I even have like races as a status condition and elemental typings. So like if you're familiar with Pokemon, fire type, that would be like a permanent status condition is how I would be defining it. That can't really be dispelled. And then same with races, like if you are playing D&D and there's an undead creature, because sometimes you have spells like if you had a cleric ability that's turn undead or something that deals extra damage to undead. It's just easier to work with if you define the races as status conditions, and then just like target, deal the calculations as if it was like a fire type attacking a grass type Pokemon, if that makes sense. So when you're doing all the math, you can be like, oh, it deals 200% damage instead of 100% damage. 100% damage would be like a normal attack, with no super effective or resistance. But then you might go to like 150 and be like, that's like, fire type against grass type. Or you might go like, 200%, which would be like the four times. Um, or, however Pokemon does their math. I haven't gotten to balancing out the combat math yet. It's more just placeholder data, if that makes sense. So this is kind of like what I've been kind of working on the past day. In notifications, I have a lot. Forget which ones were here. Probably the ones that are a bit further down the list. I'll delete that one because I don't need that. But I was thinking about, I think last time, creating a gym, a place where you get the quest item, similar to a gym in Pokemon. Create a class. This is me kind of reverting back into here about what kind of classes. So I was, uh, you know, building with the minimum viable product of the Holy Trinity. Holy Trinity. So you got your damage types, you got your damage classes, you got your tank classes, and your support classes. I don't see me needing more than 15 classes. Um, but I still don't know entirely how I want to work it. This is, do I want to go more thematic classes that correspond to each area, or do I want to start with more of like the Holy Trinity route? So playing with some ideas there. Haven't committed to anything yet. Create a typing quiz. So this is kind of not really for it's not like a house quiz or a personality quiz. In Pokemon, when you go to the first town and there's like a person who's quizzing you on like the different type matchups, and he gives you like a potion or something, and maybe they do that with status conditions. It's kind of like a subtle way to teach the player um, the mechanics of the game if they're unfamiliar. So trying to keep it probably optional, but still rewarding players who go out of their way to do it, just to maybe either refresh their memory and give them some free loot at the beginning of the game. Since I plan on having this kind of start in like an academy, um, I think that it would make sense if there was like some quizzes you could take. So these would just be some simple quizzes to introduce new players to the game. And because there probably won't be like a Wikipedia that you can just look up, that might be necessary for this kind of indie game that doesn't really have a lot of um, status or following. That kind of status conditions, same thing as type conditions. So just another kind of thing. Shouldn't be too hard to make. But I think before I, make them, I need to really solidify my opinions on what kind of status conditions I want that are going to be central to the game, and also what type of typings I want to be in the game. So I might do a Pokemon thing where each quest item is a certain type. Although I kind of want to do like I have an idea where I don't want like the player characters to necessarily have typing, because I think it's weird if like people have types. With Pokemon, I think it makes a little bit more sense, but I don't know how central I want the player characters to have a type at this current moment. And it might just be, interesting just being able to change your weapons to I want the fire sword. We're gonna try to get a bunch of fire swords to go take out this ice boss or something like that. So just a reason to sort of collect different items, but not have to change your party a whole lot. Especially if you really like certain characters, you can use them um, in any scenario. I kind of like that idea more so than trying to, just collect a bunch of student characters or whatever just to beat one boss and then never use them again. So I like the idea of your party kind of growing, and you kind of feel a bit attached to the characters. So that's just a thought. I don't know if I'm going to do it yet, but just kind of going off the idea of I haven't really solidified how I want to do this yet. So um, just making notifications to remind myself of things I want to do. Um, this is the weapons quiz, just the same as the other one. So teaching you how to equip weapons, different purposes of weapons, all that stuff. Um, and I think like for this, I might do something. I was thinking of like um, you have to click on a guy. Um, like the event would trigger by you talking to this creature or something, and you'd only be able to kill this creature if you equip this one weapon it's useless everywhere else in the game but really good against this one creature, and the only way to beat this creature is to equip this single weapon to get the reward. So I think that might be a way to do it. I haven't really decided yet, but that was just an idea. And then this is just see this development log, all these different things. um, so yeah, that's just I don't know. And then a recruit students kind of thing. So in this one, I think like one of the mechanics in Pokemon is to collect Pokemon with the Pokeballs. In this game, I'm thinking it will be like recruiting students. I don't know if it's going to be collecting a certain currency and buying students. I don't know how much I like that idea of buying people, but maybe I think it might be something more along the lines of do a quest for each student. But that's just adding a lot of work, because then I might have to create another unique quest for each student. So I'm not really sure how I want to go about it. I also don't know how I want it to, like, how much I want leveling to be a role in it, because I always think in Pokemon it sucks when you like you get far in the game and you find a Pokemon, but then you have to like grind that Pokemon up to be part of the party. So I think what I kind of like that I've seen in some games is that the items matter more than the actual character levels, and the character levels are more like friendship than they are buffing your stats. So I don't know how much I want like level stats to kind of exponentially increase the character over time. I'm thinking more like how D&D, um, you kind of, I don't know if D&D is a good example, but sort of like you know how in Pokemon, if have a lot of Pokemon references, but you know how you can buy like either how there's effort value points and like medicine where you can get like iron to increase like a defensive stat or an attack stat, stuff like that, zinc and carbos or whatever. I was thinking something along those lines where you really have there's an intentional kind of uh, sort of like skill trees or something. There's like an intentional upgrade. It's not just like the more you use them. Um, but I do like the idea of the more you use them, the more friendship they get. I don't know. Something along those lines. Haven't really decided yet. But that's that. And then one other thing I kind of want to talk about. I was watching this video by JJ something. Um, but this other one is just brain this is another way I've been brainstorming. So I already showed you the development log, me recording information here, but I also have these kinds of spreadsheets. So I'm like defining all the parameters. These are like the main stats, and then these are like the extra parameters. So everything like evasion and accuracy, counter attacks, that kind of stuff. And then these are the special parameters in RPG Maker. Just kind of defining, putting some notes, other things. These are the typings I'm kind of playing around with. The primary elements are, fire, earth, water, wind, have ice and electric, light and dark. I was thinking about maybe a nature type, a poison type. And then I don't know if you've played RuneScape, but they have these combination runes. So not all of these are, like explosion. I was just kind of playing around with like, would electricity and fire have a combination type? Um, you know, Plasma or something, snow, ice and wind, I don't know. But like steam, lava, dust, smoke, mud, mist, lightning, I think is a little bit too close to electric. Don't want it to get too confusing, but I was just thinking it might be interesting to have something like that. So I wrote it down. And again, it's much easier to, write these things down in a spreadsheet to see if you like them rather than to implement them in a game where you have all these limited, kind of stuff, and then you can't really insert and stuff without it getting a little bit complicated. Because if I were to go into types and define, electric, or not, yeah, like, it's at thunder right now, but if I were to define like lightning and explosion and I didn't like them and I was already using them in other code, it could get really complicated and messy. So that's why I have all these kinds of sheets just to record thoughts, and that's pretty much what this video is. So it's a long video just because there's a lot of notes to kind of go through. Not really code yet. Weapons and armor, just talking about different tags. So is the weapon going to have a debuff rate? So if you swing the weapon, will it have a chance to debuff? So just defining these stats on one page, so I can kind of browse them and see how I want to work weapons in the game and armor. Same with items. So like is it going to recover HP? Is it going to recover MP? And I can just kind of go through a checklist. And this kind of information is what kind of helped influence. You see these items with all the like HP recovery. You got recover HP. So this one kind of influenced the OneNote document of what I'll need and then how many of each of these I'll need. Classes. I was thinking a little bit of like D&D, a little bit of something else. I really like the idea of there being this Spellbreaker class. I don't know how I want to incorporate it yet, but especially for the the faction that's going to be very anti-magic. I think it would be cool if they had a lot of spell breakers and kind of revolved around this silent status condition where they just kind of prevent you from being able to use spells, and that's kind of like their main shtick. So finding a way to maybe use a lot of martial people against them who aren't going to get their spells silenced all the time, or just trying to figure out if there's a way to protect yourself from silence. So different ways to approach spell breakers if you're fighting against them. But I just think that would be a thematically appropriate class to have. And then your standard fighter, tank, healer, and then kind of a spellcaster that does like the magic as opposed to the fighter that does melee. And then I like the idea of there being like a class that revolves around speed. So sometimes they have like rogues with like high damage, high speed, but I kind of like the idea of like they do more damage the faster they are. which really encourages the player not to just cap out at a certain point with speed, but to really go as fast as possible. And then, they aren't really as potent against other rogues. So it's not really like one rogue sees another rogue and is just going to assassinate the other rogue. The rogues really want to target, like, they could be like tank killers if the tanks are really slow. Um, and that kind of helps. You can uh, get a bunch of slow spells on your support to really support the rogues. So if you slow everyone on the other team, then they're going to be slowed, but your rogue is also going to do more damage to them. So I don't know, that's an idea I'm kind of playing with like rogues and like speed based classes. um, that's just, and then it's more so they have really low HP. So their defenses, you can really max out their defenses, and that's kind of if they have high defense, you could be like, oh well, they're dodging all these attacks, but like if they get hit by something, they don't have a whole lot of HP, so they might be able to mitigate damage with their defenses, but they can only take so many hits, so that's why I'm kind of thinking they have low HP, and this is just my kind of interpretation on these classes that I want to implement. So a lot different than on the OneNote sheet where I was planning it out a little bit differently, but it's different mediums to really kind of see how I really want to do it before I start finalizing it in the game. And then these are some skill ideas. So really what I was doing was I was taking a lot of inspiration from D&D skills. So you might see a lot of these that are in D&D, like Armor of Agathis, Bless, Shield of Faith, and just how I could incorporate them into, from being this tabletop spell to a like an RPG. Um, just keeping them a bit simple, not going through all the little X, not going through all the nuances of each spell, but just being able to translate them from one medium to another, and then kind of organizing them by like, these ones are like kind of a buff and would require a status condition, which inspired that buff and status condition. So if I were to do Long Strider, that would be a very unique status condition that increases, movement speed. And then, aid is, I might want that to be its own thing rather than just increase the parameter. You would know that this creature is affected by the aid status condition specifically, and I could that would allow me to further balance certain skills if I don't just refer to all the movement speed skills by increasing parameters by a certain amount. You can further kind of define them based on the status condition, if that makes sense. Um, Again, these might make a little bit more sense once we start going to the game. If you actually follow the series and see where these things kind of end up, it might make a bit more sense down the road. But this is just kind of like, the planning stages still. And then status conditions, you can see there's buffs and debuffs. So in D&D, you've got like Sanctuary, which is a thing that makes it so you're really hard to hit. So it might increase like your evasion or you can't be targeted. But you also can't do any damaging spells. So it would be kind of like this also silence. Like I would have to really figure out how to like incorporate like a silencing where you can't use certain abilities. And this kind of goes back to the game of like defining types. So I could say like seal these certain skills, but if I define a skill type as healing, then you could still use your healing spells if I don't seal that skill type, if that makes sense. Again, I'm not really expecting a lot of this to make sense. It's just sort of me talking about it. But yeah, you get your crowd control. So sometimes this gets really, if you're just thinking about it, like how many crowd control spells are there? Well, I can count there's 7 right here. So, if I did all this planning, I only really need 7. That might be like, oh, okay, so I only really need 7 crowd control skills. So if I wanted to do like an anti crowd control, like in D&D there's like a freedom of movement spell, which would just be like, okay, so you're pretty much just immune to all these, or I could tag them all these as crowd control, and then in the code I could later be like seal crowd control and if that makes sense. You got your races, like I was saying. So these are based off of the D&D monster types. I don't know if I'm going to use them all. Again, going back to the scope of what images and assets do I have access to through like maybe plugins or art that comes with the program already, or how much do I want to seek out specific art, and then that kind of comes with this thing of like crediting the artist and all that stuff. So I don't know if I'm going to use them all, but just planning ahead. D&D is a pretty um, they encompass a lot of possibility. So I was thinking, starting with the 14 races that D&D has to offer might be a good place to start. Um, and then there's the elemental types. So I only have 8, I think, in this one. So these are like the core 8. It might just be the core 8, but as I was showing, I might, expand it a bit more. Don't know yet. And then this is just another races category um, that, is just me defining these. In this one, I don't think I define them. Oh, I guess I do define them. So this might be a redundant tab, but just having it just in case. And then a map idea. I don't know if this isn't really finished, but pretty much I was thinking about creating a notification actually of creating a mock map of the world, because before I start making a bunch of locations and stuff, rather than just kind of you know, pl- creating them one by one, I kind of want a reference image that would be the inspiration of the world. So it wouldn't be like it'd be kind of like fan art, concept art, if you will, of what I want the world to look like. And I'll probably use that, make it in like Incarnate or something. But just kind of create this idea of where, I want this settlement to be in north, this one to be south, and then I can kind of look at it a bit before I start actually programming different maps of like what makes like sense. Like this is going to be like an maybe an ice level. This is going to be in the mountains, and does that make sense logically in relation to this one? It may or may not. Again, it's a fantasy game. It's not like I'm creating a nonfiction world, but or a world that is, one-to-one ratios how our topography works and stuff like that. But it's better to kind of like consider those things before you start getting too deep into it. So notification 16, create, can't spell today, create concept map, and then just go into Incarnate and create a mock map of the world prior to creating legit levels. Just something really simple, just as a reminder. And these notifications will probably pop up a lot, but hopefully over the weeks, months, we reduce this a bit. I think it's good at the beginning to start, identifying things I want to do before I start completing everything. Because while I'm like, completing a lot of stuff, if I'm completing all these things, and then I'm having more ideas of like things I would want to do differently, then it starts becoming a little bit more demoralizing as I like have to redo code and stuff like that. So trying to get it done quicker, I just think this is more efficient use of time. But I'm not a game developer as a career, so I could be wrong. But yeah, I think this is a good video for now. Haven't done anything yet today, so I might do some. I don't really know if I feel like doing anything else today, but I wanted to get this video out there because yeah, then I can start thinking of what I want to do next before the next video checkpoint vlog thing. But yeah, that's enough for today. I think this is by far the longest one. Lots to talk about. But yeah, hope you have a good rest of your evening, morning, whatever time of the day it is, and I'll see you next time. Bye.